and then we can go ahead and get started. All right.
Thank you, Connor. So should we go ahead and start from here on our side?
Sounds good.
Okay. So my name is Yutaka De Silva. Actually, my name and photo are not on here, but along with me are Dr. Karim Galil and David Thompson. Karim as the CEO and founder of Mendel, and David a senior VP on the Syneos health team. And David's been in the industry for 25 plus years, as he likes to say, 25 plus. And Syneos oversees hundreds and hundreds of clinical trials a year, and David is in the real-world evidence space. He's a health economist by training, and so his perspectives are really quite insightful and valuable for us. And Karim will introduce Mendel as a company as we go forward. And so I would like to start by thanking everyone for their time. I know that time is your most valuable resource, and we've hopefully got some solutions here that you can look into the future and see how we may be able to save you some time. So I hope it's a good investment. So we'll give you guys a quick overview of the company. David will speak about some of the changes that he sees in the landscape and what's happening. We'll review a protocol that we're starting to basically validate probably the best pre-screening tool in the market, and we'll give you a little bit of a view on what that looks like. And please do ask any questions and type them in, and we'll try and address them as best as we can. So, Karim, maybe I can pass to you. You've got a couple of slides here with an overview of Mendel.
Thanks everyone for joining the webinar today. Mendel is an AI platform that helps organize electronic medical records. What that means, think of the internet without a search engine. You're not able to find what you need when you need. With email records today, it's exactly like that. It's like the internet. You cannot simply click in, I want to find all colon cancer, CRAS patients, and click a button and get a list of these patients. And what we do is we build a search engine that sits on top of this records and is able to sift through it and organize every bit of data there. This powerful AI is coupled with human intuition, and what that pretty much means is every algorithm that we have built was validated and built by not only a team of AI scientists and engineers, but also a team of physicians and clinicians who have spent their time labeling data and helping to train our AI system. And that's why we like to say it's machine precision and human intuition. There's different applications for this technology, and one of this is clinical trial matching and pre-screening, and this is the main topic for today's webinar. Before we dig into that, I want to just explain when we say we are an AI company, what that actually really means. So AI is a very broad term. There's not really a good definition for it yet. But for us, we like to think of it as multiple layers of technology. On one layer of this technology, we have the ability to look at scanned records. We're talking about PDFs, faxes, lab results, a binder that the patient comes in, and the nurse has to scan and upload in the record. We're able to look at this and digitize it, make it machine readable, and this on its own as an AI platform that uses vision algorithms to read that. Another layer of AI that we were able to build is natural language processing. And what that means is, if I say the patient was recommended for colonoscopy, as a human being, you understand that does not mean that the patient went through colonoscopy, it was just recommended. So natural language processing and understanding is the ability of the machine to read text and understand it like a human being, and sometimes better than a human being. And we built what we like to call clinical natural language processing, which is an AI that's built on top of medical data for medical data, and is able to read clinical notes, narrative, and make inferences and come to conclusions as if it's an oncologist or a research coordinator. Another really important layer of AI is the information retrieval, and that is the ability to ask a question and get an answer for it. So if the machine is able to see and is able to understand, it also needs to be able to speak. So it's the ability of coming into our platform, asking a question, and getting an answer for it in real time or as fast as possible. A fourth layer of AI that we've also built is called knowledge representation. And what that means is, how can you represent a patient? And what the simplest way of explaining this is like building a patient avatar or a digital twin of patients. And you can use this for various applications like synthetic control arms, pragmatic trials, phase 4 trials, and I'll let them speak more about that. With that being said, I would like to pass to David.
Yeah, thanks, Kareem, and wanted to thank Mendel for inviting me to be part of this. This is really interesting stuff that we're talking about today. People have recognized that the healthcare industry lags far behind most other industries in the country, in the world, for that matter, in terms of integration of technology. And what we're seeing now is a giant game of catch-up that's being played. And you can see this quote from former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb related to digital technologies. He was very forward-thinking in all this, and I think the FDA deserves a lot of credit for giving a tremendous boost to the application of technologies such as AI to the healthcare setting. So, this is really interesting, and one of the things that at Syneos that we've recognized is that the whole idea of site selection and patient recruitment for trials is evolving very, very rapidly, and it's moving from, the traditional way, which was almost similar to the use of the yellow pages, if you remember big old phone books and trying to identify different addresses or phone numbers. And, in the old days, the way we would recruit sites and patients was very similar. We would be looking at investigator lists for different sites and talking to key opinion leaders and literally dialing them up and asking how many patients meeting certain criteria that they had. Now, everything is flipped on its head, and with the proliferation of electronic health records data and the availability of these data in a de-identified form, we're able to flip that whole process on its head. And we're able to identify the patients meeting selected inclusion-exclusion criteria first, and then work back from the patients to the site and from the site to the actual provider. Now, we don't know who the patients are because the entire encryption process takes place at the site, but the sites are able to re-identify patients and then initiate the process of patient recruitment into a study. And so this is really, as I said, flipped the whole thing on its head and facilitated the way this is all being done for greater efficiency. Now, the really interesting thing is that the availability of data from EHR is not the same from one to the next. And all of the EHR data that are in structured form, that is, in columns of variables that are easily accessed, that's kind of the tip of the iceberg and will enable you to identify basic things like diagnoses and procedures and receipt of different treatments, and sometimes with the dates as well. But, between 70 to 80% of the key information from an EHR is contained in the unstructured data, sometimes referred to as the physician's notes section. And that's where everything is detailed in the EHR. And so we need ways of tapping into that. And that's where natural language processing and artificial intelligence techniques like machine learning come into play. And that's the solution that Mendel has so nicely developed here. And it makes all the difference in the world in terms of three key things that are noted on this slide: the completeness of the data, That is to say, we're not simply getting a bit of the EHR, but we're getting information from the entire EHR. The accuracy of the data, because when you pull all of that together, you're able to ascertain that, okay, a diagnosis that appears in the structured data isn't simply a rule out, okay? So the doctor might note that he was investigating whether or not a patient had a particular type of tumor, for example, but the results would come back negative. Well, sometimes that gets mixed up in the structured fields, and we would erroneously identify a patient as having a particular type of cancer when, in fact, the testing had been ruled out. And that information is going to be available from the unstructured data. And finally, the validation of the data needs to take place, and that's where all of this information is brought together and can actually be looked at against the patient chart. So we can look at and compare the data available through the computerized searches versus manual searches, and that's where validation exercises come into play. All of this is coming together for a very nice solution, and I'll pass it back to Kareem and Yutaka to walk us through.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. And so I think as we get to a view of the platform and the system, we really believe that we've developed the most powerful pre-screening tool in the market, and that is going to be the most benefit to you as a site and teams and staff working at sites to bring these benefits to your patients. And we'll go into a bit more detail on that. We've done an initial pilot study with a couple of sites. We've looked at all of their data, and we did an assessment of how our AI platform performed against the traditional pre-screening practices that they've run for previous protocols. And it was a pilot, it's been published, it was peer-reviewed by the DIA, and what we're doing now is trying to validate those claims, and we've initiated a study to get this out a bit wider and be able to scientifically prove that this approach works, and that it works for sites, and that it's reproducible and accurate. So this study, we're calling it MN1900, and in one slide, we'll try and explain what it is. It's a retroactive exercise. We look at 4 protocols that you have run in the past, where your enrollment is closed and patients have been entered into the study. And what we would do is look at the data that was available to you in your EMR system at that time and run our AI processing on that and see if we identify the same candidate patients that your actual team had identified at the time, what that process looked like and how they went through the screening procedures and progressed, and compared that with the outputs of the system. And we'd be able to see how long it took for the system to operate versus how long it took for your staff to identify these patients and put them into the queue for a study. It worked quite elegantly with our pilots, and we're hoping to have sites in the UK and the US. We've got a few spots left. I think right now we've got 13 or so committed sites, and so we've got a bit of space, and we thought we'd conduct a webinar to get the word out a little bit further because the interest has been quite high. So the parameters that we're measuring are here on the right, and if you are interested, we can certainly schedule a separate call to go over this in a bit more detail. And what we wanted to do is give you a little bit of a taste and the flavor of what it's like in the system. So the next few minutes are going to be some videos of what the platform does, and it'll be 2 components. And first will be a layer that does the OCR, or the optical character recognition, and reading of your unstructured data and how that works. And then there's a privacy component to that and how the de-identification process works, and how that engine has been certified by a third party to be HIPAA compliant and ensures that any personal identifiable information is managed appropriately and as required by regulations. And then we'll take a look at what you would see as a user of the platform and can interface with the platform to solve some of your problems. So we've done this as a video instead of a live demonstration to make sure that it doesn't pick up while we run. But this is a scanned image that's available. We picked it up from the internet, and you can see some of the issues with the scan. I mean, it's not super streaky, but there are a lot of gaps and faded text. And this is what the OCR engine would output into a readable, intelligent document that can now be scanned and understood. A lot of the commercial OCR platforms are not specific for medical records, and this is a proprietary version that has been. And you can now see the de-identification engine, and what that does is it blanks out all of the names of the patients, of the physicians. It also adds some numbers or subtracts some numbers from dates so that birthdays, treatment dates, all of these types of things are not identifiable back to a patient, especially for, say, rare diseases where the patient populations may be very small. And that's how it works. Now, sites can see what is your own patients, of course, unblinded, but anything else that any other system or Mendel would see is always 100% blinded.
And Yutaka, just a point on that. Again, as Yutaka has mentioned, there's a lot of commercial systems out there that can do this kind of digitization, yet I want to explain why it doesn't work on medical documents, because all the technology is built today is built on top of English. And medicine is not really English. It's a lot of Latin and a lot of different kind of terms that you don't find in a dictionary, like hepatosplenomegaly, right? What Mendel has done differently is we have built our technology from scratch, and we're not using anything off-shelf or commercial, and we trained it exclusively on medical language and specifically in oncology. That's why our system performs at an accuracy that ranges between 97 to 99%, while most of the commercial systems that exist today is an accuracy that goes from 60 to 70%. So that's obviously a huge step forward in the field of computer vision and medical language.
Thanks, Kareem. Yeah, thank you. And what's on the screen now is a view into what the system and the platform looks like. And for a coordinator logging in the morning, this is essentially what they see and how they'd be able to really interrogate the data that's in your EHR intelligently. And it looks kind of like Google, and it's essentially a search engine for your EMR system. So here in the search bar, you can type whatever it is that you're looking for. This simulation has been built off of all of the data at one hospital. And so if you type in, let's say colon cancer, and start there, it will pull up a list of the 5,400 and plus patients that they have. And they come up as tiles, and you can see the patient's names. These are de-identified, so they come up as Jane or John Doe or an identification number. If you're at the site, you'd be able to see, of course, all of your data. And the attributes that the system is using to pull them up are highlighted in bold. And you can see it's not just colon cancer that gets pulled up. It'll look at things like adenocarcinoma of the cecum, and it knows that is colon cancer. And you can then pull up your records and instances, and it will show you what it is that it's searching through and highlight what the terminology are that it's using to choose its outputs. You can then add more. You can say crass, or you can continue adding more and more, and it'll filter through your patients and narrow that down. So that was at 300 or so patients. As another example, we look at non-small cell lung cancer. There aren't very good specific diagnosis codes within all of the variations of lung cancer, so you can run into those types of problems without a semantic search that's intelligent. And you can continue adding ors, knots, time frame tables and time frames to select through. Now, the next feature, we call it trial-based, and this is the trial matching platform, and we've subscribed to the commercially available lists of all studies going on all over the country. So let's say that you have 10 liver cancer patients, but you don't have an active study for that. You can actually learn about that protocol and be in touch with the sponsor. Or it may be that the sponsor can be in touch with you to bring some of those benefits to your patients. And this is all supported by data, available instantly, and updated at a frequency that we determine with every hospital. And there's a feasibility section. So if you get feasibility questionnaires that Dave mentioned, rather than having to go through and manually look through your patients or try and understand and estimate how many patients would benefit, you can actually copy and paste, drag it right into the platform. It develops a set of queries in the search engine, and you can run your feasibility output in seconds, and you'll get a total number of patients that match these criteria that would be loaded into the system. You can also load all of the protocols that you have ongoing. So let's say that you're running 10 studies. You put all of the criteria in, and the system will update every morning, let's say, and it'll give you a tile of patients that are eligible and meet the criteria. And they're suggested by the system. You can go in and see the details of those patients, and then you can move those patients into the next step in your workflow, whether they, you know that they won't participate because they're not interested in studies, or you can send them to the investigator to review further, or put them next in your queue to contact to see if they are interested in a certain protocol. So it really improves the life of a coordinator looking through all of these documents, looking for patients and trying to match all of the activities that are going on at a research site. And this is why we say we believe this is the best pre-screening tool that has been developed and is out there. The teams that are using it so far really love it, and the feedback that we get has been extremely positive. So it is a nice opportunity to validate all of these claims in terms of a study. And now you can understand what it is that we'd be looking at. How long did you spend in the past looking through your records to identify and pre-screen patients versus a system like this that can do this for you essentially within seconds or at the maximum a couple of minutes on a daily basis and real time. So hopefully now you have many questions and you can type them into your thing and we can try and address them. And we're just about 5 minutes from our time, which hopefully you guys have enjoyed and learned a few things. In regards to next steps, you can contact us. There are emails here for Kareem or for Dave. You can say that you're interested and we'd get back in touch with you quite quickly and share a bit more information and even be able to walk through a live demo with you of the system and answer any further questions.
Okay. And we actually do have a couple of questions that have come in. One is, how can we trust artificial intelligence, AI?
That's actually a really good question. So obviously AI again is a very not well-defined term yet, and you've obviously all read about Tesla's making accidents when it was on autopilot. And yeah, AI is like any machine, can make errors. What we have done here at Mendel is, again, we paired human intuition with the machine precision. What that means is we have a layer of human validation that goes on top of our AI, makes sure that everything that you guys get to see through the system has been vetted by a clinical professional. What it does is, one, it ensures the quality, but two, it also gets all the mistakes that the AI is doing and correct them in the future. A second thing that we have done here is we are the only company that exists today that was able to publish in a peer-reviewed journal an actual study comparing AI to human and show what takes a human 200 days and sometimes was done in a couple of minutes. And we're now investing more in expanding the study on 20 sites. So although we don't need any kind of regulatory approval on our product, we still have done a lot of investment and effort in getting this out there, testing it, and getting results that back the claims. And your participation in the study is actually a step forward, because unless the medical community steps in and starts validating all these AI products out there, there's going to be a really big mess. And I'm pretty sure David would agree on that. I don't know if you want to add something on this.
No, I think, you know, this is all coming together really nicely at this point in time. And, you know, FDA is very clear that they view the clinical trial process as being broken, and the solutions are going to be technology-based. It's humans who have been responsible for breaking it, and it's going to be technology that's going to be a key part of the solution for all this, and that's why this is so exciting.
Yeah. And I think it's a really interesting question, because it's this trust question, right? But really what AI does is they're doing tasks, and what the system is designed and intended to do is to cover tasks and activities that take a lot of time and do it with more accuracy and more precision. What it's not doing necessarily is making decisions, right? And it is not a person, it's not a coordinator, it's not a doctor. And what it's doing is simplifying some of the tasks that are very difficult and time-consuming to answer. So that's the human intuition part, where, you know, the trust in the system is not necessarily that it's making any decisions. The decisions are still being made by people. It's really about simplifying specific tasks, like pre-screening patients across a very wide and complicated set of data. I think the other thing that trust might imply is about the, you know, this is patient confidential information that we're talking about. It's quite serious and significant, and it's regulated by HIPAA, and everybody is kind of has to operate through those constraints. So one of the things that Mendel did is develop the de-identification engine. And what that is supposed to do is remove all patient names, doctor names, dates, and redact any information that can be traced back to personal identification methods. Now, it's great to say that we've done this and we've developed something and that it works. Please trust us. But what we've done is we've gone to a third-party provider. They're in the UK. It's a company called Mirador that validates systems and outputs. And what they did is validate the outputs of the system on a significant data set, and they can place the claim that it does match what it's supposed to do. And that was found to be 99.8% accurate. The HIPAA requirements are 99%, so, you know, well beyond what HIPAA requires, and validated by a third party. And what we do is, for anybody that is contributing data into the system, we can do a similar type of exercise to validate that the systems are working as they intend. So that might be another element of trust and how it is that we address that.
Great, thank you. I think that answers that question. We did have one more question. Do you only work in oncology? If not, what other indications do you work within?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So at the moment, we're actually working exclusively in oncology. And back to the trust question and what Yutaka has mentioned is we see that sites and pharma companies are, one of the problems they have is as they are buying or purchasing, making AI purchasing decisions, they don't know what are the right questions to ask. And sometimes when other players would come and say, we have built an AI system that works on any therapeutic area, that on its own would raise a lot of eyebrows. And the reason is the state of AI today is not yet mature where it can do general AI. You don't see Google or Amazon have a general AI system yet. And it's very evident if you go ask Siri, a lot of the times when you ask a question, say, sorry, I didn't get that, or sorry, cannot help you with that. So the trick is today, the more focused you are on one specific task, the better you can be. So something like in oncology, in many cases, the patient has been mentioned to be a stage 1 cancer patient. Yet in some CT scan, we can see that the patient became metastatic and no one updated his record. So a good AI system is able to read between the lines and conclude that this patient is no longer just a stage 1 cancer patient. Those kind of really small algorithms is what we spend our time perfecting. Now, once you figure out one therapeutic area, translating that to other therapeutic areas becomes an easier job. And that's the this is our 2 to 3 years plan to move outside oncology. But as of now, we're only doing oncology, and we can easily make the claim that we are the best AI system that do exist today when it comes specifically to oncology, and we don't make that claim outside. Now, that being said, we have seen sites using the same exact tech on all other therapeutic areas, and it's working. We just don't actively market or put claims on that because, again, our main strategy is unless I can validate that in a peer-reviewed environment, we wouldn't feel comfortable making the claim.
And I think the other thing too is oncology is deeply difficult, right? And the terminology used in oncology is quite wide as well. All the different types of cancers, stages of cancers, definitions of cancers, where, type 2 diabetes, an EMR system can probably sift through a pretty significant number of that using keyword searches and much more rudimentary technology to do that. So the biggest problem that we see and matching, the industry and where they're developing products and the type of products that are being developed, it matches quite well with oncology. So that's the initial focus, and then we'll expand from there.
Okay, thank you. A couple of other questions kind of hand in hand. One, how can you ensure patient privacy? And two, how do you integrate with the EMR?
I'll take a stab on that also. So as far as how we integrate with the EMR systems, we are EMR agnostic, which means we can work with whatever EMR vendor the site is working with. And the way we do that is we basically sit behind the firewall of the site and de-identify the data on the site. What that means is your patient data will never leave the site. And once that happens, we get a version that the AI is able to work on and start basically helping the site with, as you mentioned, pre-screening and all of that. But in an essence, it's a very simple, straightforward process. It usually takes 2 to 3 weeks to be able to get a site up and running. We work closely with the IT teams and on establishing those kind of devices. And actually, that links quite nicely to the privacy question. So we have identified at least 3 categories of solutions today. Some solutions would say we sit behind a firewall, your data will never leave the site. Those kind of solutions tend to be really tend to not have any AI layers on top of it. And the reason is AI requires a lot of processing power. So if I have to put a device behind the firewall and run de-identification or any complex AI system on a site, that would take probably a year worth of computer processing. So those kind of devices, although it ensures that the data does not leave the site, it comes with less competent technology that's only able to look at structured data and nothing beyond that. There's the second category where we find solutions that sit behind the firewall and upload data to the cloud. Cloud has better processing power, and you're able to run a lot of algorithms faster. The problem is you're risking, although the device sits behind the firewall, the data is leaving the site, which comes with a lot of regulatory kind of concerns. What we have done here is we've created a third way of doing it, which is, we have a device behind the firewall, but we de-identify there, and before the data leaves the site, this de-identification is done, then it goes to the cloud. So we're able to apply really complex AI solutions without the need of putting $100,000 super big server behind the firewall, which some sites wouldn't be able to afford. As far as the privacy goes also, and I think you touched on that, we feel like we cannot be in a position where we make the claim and validate it ourselves. So that's why we work with third parties that are able to run kind of analysis on the data and provide the site with a certificate that says, look, your data has been de-identified and meets the threshold of HIPAA. And that's a really important thing that sites needs to be more aware of, is like whenever you see any AI kind of thing, you're not expected to be a computer scientist, but you can always look at the data that backs this claim, and as long as this data is coming from third parties, it usually tends to be more trustworthy kind of set of data.
And another question that kind of goes hand in hand, is your technology HIPAA compliant?
So the word HIPAA compliant, technology is HIPAA compliant, is actually a very generic term. If the question is, are you guys handling data in a HIPAA compliant manner? The answer is yes, 100%. HIPAA is not a term that's just only about the technology being how it handles the data. HIPAA is a more generic term that includes how the site itself handles our own technology. So from a Mendel perspective, yes, it's 100% HIPAA compliant. And again, don't take our word for it. We do provide a certificate from a third party that kind of analyzes that. I mean, just to explain that, if a site, and we have seen that, and we train sites not to do this, if a site accesses my system outside the hospital, when we ask not to do that, and in essence, the system is HIPAA compliant, but the act of accessing it outside the hospital is not a HIPAA compliant interaction with the software. And we try to work with the sites to explain these kind of things to them. Most sites are now HIPAA trained and are aware of these kind of guidelines.
All right, thank you. I think that is all of the questions that I have received. Just double checking here that none others have come in, but I believe that is it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to thank David for taking the time for this. And he nicely put in actually the difference between structured and unstructured data. I really enjoyed that part, and I hope that this was useful for the sites. A lot of folks need to understand this kind of business. So thanks, David. Thanks, HIPAA, and thanks, Syneos, for setting this up.
Yeah, and I enjoyed this whole talk. So this should help a lot to attract some more sites for this study. And these results are going to be equally powerful to the prior one.
Awesome. And thanks everyone for joining. And we'll reach back out to you to see if there's anything else that we can help you with. So we really appreciate everybody's time, and have a very nice day, afternoon, morning, all of those anyone around the world. Have a nice tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.